Hello, Wellspring. It is March 18th, and I'm sorry we're a little late today, but today is Zephaniah's 11th birthday. I was celebrating his birthday and a little distracted and forgot to get our video in, but we're catching up now. And surprise, I got Jesse with me today.
Hey guys.
So we are moving out of the book of Ruth. We're moving into the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel. And one of the things that is going to happen throughout 1st and 2nd Samuel is that we're going to transition out of the time of the judges ruling into the time of kings. We're going to see Samuel be the last judge, and we're going to see him anoint the first king of Israel because the people ask for a king. And we're going to follow Samuel's story and his birth and how he comes to rule. We're going to see some interactions with his sons, and then we're going to see him move into some of that prophetic role as he's the last judge over the season of the judges of Israel. And it should be an exciting journey. If you haven't picked up with us yet, or if you know someone that should pick up with us, encourage them to check out these videos. Come log on, subscribe, hit a like so that you get notifications, right? Or the notification bell. Now I'm doing the YouTube thing that everybody does. That's kind of funny. But yeah, so awesome to have Jesse with me here today. So we're going to read from the NIV, and we're in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And this is our reading for March 18th. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, let me get that right, from Ramathaim, a Zuphite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and a Maphraite. He had two wives, one was called Hannah, and one was called Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her, till she wept and would not eat. Her husband, Elkanah, would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? Once, when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and said to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put your wine away. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who's deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered her, Go in peace, and may the Lord, the God of Israel, grant you what you have asked of him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went away and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home in Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, Because I asked the Lord for him. When her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifices to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always.
Well,
Do what seems best to you, her husband Elkanah told her. Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word. So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli and said to him, Pardon me, my lord. As surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord, and he worshipped the Lord there. Pretty
Jeez Louise, man.
Crazy way to start the book of Samuel, right? So, wow, just a quick recap, right? We have Hannah, who is married to Elkanah. Elkanah has another wife, Peninnah, who's had multiple children. And Peninnah continues to ridicule and mock Hannah for her inability to have children. Culturally, they could have been making assumptions that maybe there was sin in Hannah's life, that the Lord was keeping her womb closed, or perhaps there was something wrong with Hannah, right? And so Peninnah is probably mocking her. Oh, you sinner, you wicked woman, you broken person. This is why you can't have a child. God's judgment is upon you. And it breaks Hannah's heart. But we see that Hannah is actually a person who continues to go up to the house of the Lord with Elkanah, her husband, and her family, continues to pursue the Lord. But interestingly enough, that bullying and that mocking and that brings on Hannah's grief moves her into such a place of anguish and grief that she gets mistaken for a wicked woman again by the priest of the Lord, right? So there she sits, or actually the scripture says she stands up and she's praying, eyes closed, lips moving, but she's praying from the heart. So no voice, no noise is heard coming from her mouth. And she's seeking the Lord. But Eli the priest is like, you drunk woman, what are you doing? Put your wine away. And she says, oh no, my Lord. Peninnah has been trying to tell me that I'm a wicked woman and that I'm barren because the Lord has forsaken me or because I'm sinful. And I've been mocked for not having children. And I've been ridiculed and I've been outcast in my own family by my husband's wife and all of this trouble. But I'm not drunk. I'm not a wicked woman. No wine or beer has touched my lips here today. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm praying out of that bereavement, out of that brokenness, out of the space of being bullied, out of the space of being ostracized. And I'm seeking the Lord, the God of mercy, the God of justice, the God who we've heard has extended his mighty hand and delivered Israel out of Egypt, the God who has sent judges to free us from the oppressions of the Moabites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Philistines that have been around us. That same God, I'm praying to him and asking for mercy and for justice and for a child. And Eli says to her, okay, I mistook you. And he recognizes in her in that moment virtue. And so as a priest of the Lord, Eli says to her, may God grant you the desire of your heart. Right. And then the scripture says to us that night she goes home, she becomes with child, and she makes this vow, this child I'm going to give back to the Lord as soon as I'm able, because the Lord gave it to me. And whatever the Lord has given to us, right, is a gift from the Lord. Just like what we receive in finances or blessings or home or even the breath in our lungs, the life that we have today, this is all a gift from the Lord. And like Hannah, we ought to offer back to the Lord what we can out of our lives, right? But Hannah has this child, Samuel, weans him, takes him back to the temple with a sacrifice, and says, this child is going to be like a Nazarite. Remember, she doesn't make a Nazarite vow, but a similar vow to the Nazarite vow that Samson took, that no razor would touch his head. She says, no razor is going to touch Samuel's head. And I'm going to give him back to the Lord. Pretty amazing story, pretty amazing way to start off this book. And so this is going to be the author of this book, the one who writes and tells us the histories and the stories that's going to happen and how God's hand is at work. And among the Israelite people over these next several days as we're going through 1st and 2nd Samuel. Jesse, I did most of the talking now. Was there anything that jumped out at you? Anything you want to reflect on in this space?
I mean, something that I loved about hearing this, I've heard this story many times, so just hearing it again, I never caught this before. So she's in absolute grief, right? And she shares how much grief she's in. And the Bible's very clear about it. Like, it points out where in her heart, privately, her husband's like, am I not more precious than 10 sons?
Yeah.
But then when she goes to give Samuel over to the Lord, it doesn't say she wept. It doesn't say she was grieved. It doesn't say how sad she was. And I think that's because she wasn't.
Yeah.
They would have said, they clearly said before, I think they would have said it. So I think it's very interesting that, like, she asked for something and the Lord gave it to her.
Yeah.
And she didn't require more.
Yeah.
It was enough.
Yeah.
What the Lord had given her was enough, and she wanted to fulfill it. It was a part of the promise.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. So she receives this incredible gift from the Lord. It brings the contentment and joy to her that she'd been searching for.
She didn't need more. And
everything she got, she gave it back.
And a lot of times when I search for stuff on my own, when I shouldn't, and I get it, it's like, I want more. This wasn't enough, but the Lord gave her something, and it was enough. Wow. I think that's very interesting.
Wow. So I think there's a number of points for us to take away, just from what Jesse's saying and from what the Scripture says that we can dwell on today and this evening still. The first is perhaps you find yourself in the position of Hannah. You've been mocked, you've been ridiculed, people have mistaken you for a wicked person or have made ill assumptions about you and assigned things to you that maybe aren't true.
Yeah.
Perhaps you've been ostracized and outcast. And you find yourself like Hannah in anguish and in deep grief, crying out to the Lord for mercy, crying out to the Lord to be seen, to be known, to be understood, and perhaps something tangible from the Lord that He would give you to say to you, I see you, my child. I recognize you. And so I would encourage you to be like Hannah. Year after year, she returned to the temple of the Lord at Shiloh, made the sacrifices with her husband, and sought the Lord. Continue to seek the Lord. He's faithful. He will not leave you bereft and in bereavement. He will hold you. Scripture says He mourns with those who mourn. He sees us. He knows our needs. He cares for us. One of the things that always strikes me is when Jesus looks out on the crowds and Scripture says, and He had compassion on them. When God sees you, He has compassion. So press into the compassion and mercy of our God. The second thing is perhaps it's time to start asking the Lord, with the things that You've given me, are there spaces that perhaps I'm not living in the full contentment and joy of it in the way that I should because I haven't given them back to You?
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
When God blesses us with something and we have an opportunity to bless back to God and say, God, thank You for Your provision. Thank You for Your gifts. Thank You for what You've offered to us. And we bless that back to God or give that back to God. Some ways that brings the gift to its fulfillment. That brings it to a completion. That moves us full circle. God, You've given me life. I give this life back to You. God, You gave me the death and resurrection of Your Son. Now I'm going to live for You. God, You've given me a job. I'm going to give tithe. God, You've given me the ability to have a family. I'm going to offer my family back into Your hands because You're going to care for them and love them better than I can. Right?
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
It just reminds me of, back, not back, in the future with the kings when God says to them, hey, go take this land's going to be yours, but you have to kill them. You have to do that for your future. And they take the land, they take what they want, but they don't give it back. They take it for themselves, they do it the way they think is right, and then it comes back and it curses them and it hurts them. You got to give it back if that's the promise you give. And as you'll see, Samuel turns into one of the most amazing people, in my opinion, in the entire Bible. So it's awesome.
So, seek the Lord if you're in that place of bereavement, if you're in that place of grief, if you're ostracized, if you're the bullied and picked on. Seek His mercy. Look for joy from the Lord. He'll be faithful to give it.
Yeah.
And then give back to God what belongs to Him.
Yes.
All things have been created by Him and through Him, and all things are due to Him.
Yeah.
Right? So, God bless you, Wellspring. It was awesome having you here today, Jesse. Thanks for hanging out. All right, we will. Maybe we'll see you again, but I'll see you again for sure.
For sure.
Tomorrow. Have a great night. God bless you, Wellspring.